So you've got your check ride scheduled. You've done some mock orals and you're still curious of what to expect that day. I'm going to walk you through the flow of your check ride day and share some tips with you so you can crush it and be successful. Let's dive in. First things first, how do you dress? It's all about the first impression. You want to be comfortable, but this isn't a party, a rave, or a hot date. Dress like you're meeting your significant other's parents for the first time. Polished, professional, presentable. People judge you by how you look. And while that might not be fair, it's the reality. You've worked so hard for this day. You've studied for hours. You've spent a lot of money. So let's play to win. And one more thing, don't overdo it with the cologne and perfume. You'll be in a small room and a small airplane with another person for hours. So less is more. Before you head out, make sure you pack yourself a snack and a bottle of water. I'd avoid anything that's overly sugary or too caffeinated. You don't want to be jittery and crash midway through your check ride. You also don't want to be running to the restroom unnecessarily. As for the water, don't overdo it. Hydration should have been happening 2-3 days before. You're not about to hydrate the day of. Arrive at least 20 to 30 minutes early. You don't want to rush. And this gives you a chance to relax. Find the restroom and use it if you need to. Make sure you wash your hands and face and take a moment to collect yourself. Oh, and here's a tip. Grab some extra paper towels and stash them in your pockets. Trust me, if you get nervous and your hands get clammy, you'll thank me later. Now you're meeting the examiner. You'll shake their hand and introduce yourself.
No one likes a cold, clammy handshake.
This is where my last tip comes in handy. Keep your hands dry and stay confident. This is where you make a solid first impression. Next up, checking your documents. The examiner will invite you to sit. You'll then need to present several things. Your government issued ID, your student pilot certificate, make sure the back is signed, your medical certificate, and of course, your private pilot written exam. It's a good idea to decode the questions you missed on your private pilot written exam. You can simply Google those codes. You'll find them on the results of your written exam. Google them and it will come up with the subject matter to which it pertains. Your logbook will also be inspected. The examiner is going to want to look at all of your signed endorsements. It's also a good idea to tab your logbook, noting the pages where you fulfilled specific requirements. For instance, this page is tabbed Instrument Completion. So if I come over to my instrument hours, this is the page in which I fulfilled that requirement of 3 hours for your private pilot check ride. Organization is everything. It makes things very simple. You're also going to need your FTN number and your IACRA password. It's a good idea to have those written down in your check ride binder. Speaking of a check ride binder, it is essential for staying organized. You're going to want to have copies of all your documents, your navlog, scratch paper, and more. I'll make a separate video on how to organize your check ride binder, so stay tuned for that. And of course, don't forget your sunglasses. For these, I trust Flying Eyes. They're made with pilots in mind. The frames are damn near indestructible. They're extremely flexible. And as you can see, razor thin. So they're gonna fit under your headset and not cause any noise pollution. And my favorite feature, they look good. You're gonna be a pilot soon, and you've gotta do so in style. I've got a 10% discount code for you in the description down below. Next, the examiner is gonna wanna see the airplane's documents. So make sure you've gone over these with the airplane's owner or your mechanic. They're gonna wanna see things like ADs, airworthiness certificate, 100-hour, annuals, etc. Once all the documents are sorted, the examiner will collect your payment and officially start the check ride. This is your moment, the big test. Don't worry, there aren't any huge surprises. You've studied for this, and if there's something you don't know, don't get flustered. Be honest, don't guess, and do not ramble. The examiner is simply going to go through the Airman Certification Standards, or ACS, and I'm holding the oral portion of that here in my hand right now. This is out on Google. All you have to do is Google Private Pilot Airman Certification Standards. I'm going to start by reading all of Task A from the ACS, and for the remaining sections, I'm just going to read the task name and then maybe give 1 or 2 things from that task that I remember from my check ride. Task A, pilot qualification. Objective, to determine the applicant exhibits satisfactory knowledge, risk management, and skills associated with the airman and medical certificates, including privileges, limitations, currency, and operating as a pilot in command as a private pilot. The knowledge section, certification requirements, recent flight experience, and record keeping. Do you have the hours, the night landings, the cross country, the hood time, etc.? Privileges. Do you know what the privileges are that you can exhibit as a private pilot? Do you know the limitations of a private pilot? Medical certificates, class 1, class 2, class 3, expirations, privileges, temporary disqualifications. Do you know what documents are required to exercise your private pilot privileges? That is a tongue twister. Try saying that 5 times fast. Then they're going to also talk to you about basic med. Do you understand how basic med works? Risk management. The applicant is able to identify, assess, and mitigate risk associated with proficiency versus currency. Do you know what those are? Proficiency versus currency. Currency, can you legally do it? Proficiency, is it safe for you to do so? Example, I haven't flown at night in 79 days. The minimum is 90 days to carry passengers flying at night. So legally, I can do so, but is it safe? I'm current, but am I proficient? Task B, airworthiness requirements. This is where they're going to ask you questions that pertain to all those acronyms. Aviates, tomato flames, flying with inoperative equipment. So what are your steps for going about that? Your examiner is likely to give you a scenario and ask, is it safe to fly? Can we still go fly? So they're going to ask you to interpret these rules to make sure you can understand them. Here's a tip. Always choose the safe answer. The DPE isn't looking for you to be macho. Task C, weather information. You're going to be asked to read a tab, read a METAR, and then interpret weather. We're going to talk about fog, icing, rain, hail, thunderstorms, i.e. convective activity. You're also going to be asked about different types of clouds. And all of this ultimately is about making the safe decision on whether or not it's a go or no-go situation. If weather comes in along your route, you're going to be asked about diverting or why you would divert. Another thing you may see is weather symbols, like, the little stars, the weird little squiggly S thing, to explain what those mean. You'll also be asked about weather abbreviations. Moving on to task D, cross-country planning. They're either going to go over your nav log or we're going to talk about different things in ForeFlight. Personally, my DPE used ForeFlight. I had a nav log prepared. We didn't even look at it. He was like, that's way too much. Let's do this on ForeFlight. And he asked me questions along the way. As you get into your cross-country plan, you're going to talk about airspace, obstacles, terrain, weather, why you chose certain altitudes over others. You're also going to talk about timing. It's important to have a decently accurate time figure of how long it's going to take you to get from A to B. Another thing you're going to mention is your fuel burn. You need to make sure you can make it to your airport. We're talking VFR day right now. And for VFR day, you need to have an additional 30 minutes of fuel on board to be able to cruise for 30 minutes. They may also ask you the different ways of obtaining a weather brief. So make sure you're familiar with that as well. It's all about safety. You are the pilot. There's nobody there that's going to tell you you can or can't do something. When you become a pilot, the crazy and scary thing is you can technically do whatever you want, even if you're not supposed to, and it's technically illegal. So be safe. Task E, National Airspace Systems. In this section, you're going to be asked to look at charts and identify different types of airspace. You're going to be asked about special use airspace, special flight rules airspace, as well as TFRs that may pop up or that may be visible on your map. So make sure you understand all of these symbols. Again, knowledge is power. You want to prove you're a competent, safe, and able pilot. Task F, performance limitations. This is where you're going to get some equations that are going to require you to go into your POH, likely in section 5, where all of the performance and limitations are. Expect to get a weight shift problem to calculate whether you're still within the CG envelope. Expect to get a question pertaining to takeoffs or landings with a 50-foot obstacle, doing a short field landing. You've got a tailwind. Is it still possible? So make sure you go through your POH, understand what's in the box of the chart, but also look up above at the special notes. For instance, in the airplane that I was flying on my check ride, here are the notes in terms of landing distance. Decreased distances 10% for each 9 knots of headwind. For operations in tailwinds, increase distance by 10% for each 2 knots. So you're going to want to take those under consideration when you're doing your calculation. The DPE is also going to give you the wind when they're asking this question. So make sure you note, is it a headwind? Is it a tailwind? If it's a tailwind, what I did was I wrote 3 big lines underneath that number to make me know, hey, it's a tailwind. Make sure you refer to the notes. My DPE didn't check all of my questions or answers. What he really went to was the question that pertained to tailwinds, because he knew if I got that question right, then I'm able to calculate all the other questions and I'm paying attention to the fine print and the notes. Next, we've got task G, operation of systems. They're going to ask you about different systems in your aircraft. They'll ask you what type of flaps you have. They'll ask you about your ailerons, your landing gear. Is it tricycle or conventional? They're going to ask you about your engine. When they ask about the airplane's motor, you'll want to know things like the manufacturer, the model number. Is it naturally aspirated? Is it fuel injected? Is it horizontally opposed? Etc. They may ask about the battery system. How many volts is the battery versus the voltage of the alternator? Why is the alternator more powerful than the battery? The answer to that question is so that the battery can be charged. They'll ask you about fuel, how many gallons of total versus usable. They may ask you about the avionics, like what's currently installed in the airplane. You'll definitely get some questions about the pedostatic system. Likely here is where you'll be asked to draw the pedostatic system, the fuel system, and the vacuum system. As for the pedostatic system, they're going to ask you questions about, well, what happens if this particular hole is clogged? The ram air hole is clogged. What's going to happen? If the ram air hole and the drain hole are clogged, what's going to happen? If only the drain hole is clogged, what's going to happen? So make sure you're familiar with that. If you don't know the answer to those questions, ask your CFI, go over it, make flashcards. Task H, human factors. They're going to ask you about, hypoxia, the middle ear, the optical illusion, stress, fatigue, carbon monoxide, motion sickness, the effects of drugs and alcohol. They'll also ask about nitrogen in the blood. This is about like after diving, how long do you have to wait till you can fly? They'll also ask you about the hazardous attitudes, distractions, loss of situational awareness, and disorientation. So you need to show that you understand these things and you know how to avoid getting yourself into these dangerous situations. First, it comes from understanding, then interpreting and going, here's what I would do to prevent those things, or I'm in the situation, so I'm just not going to fly because it's not safe. And that is the ACS. If you haven't printed it out yet, do yourself a favor and get it. And if you want me to dive deeper into the ACS, let me know in the comments down below. I'll have my buddy Jack come over, who is a CFI, and we will go through the ACS from top to bottom. But let me know down below and we'll get that video made. If you pass the oral, you're likely to get 10 to 15 minutes to use the restroom and get yourself ready, because now it's time to go out and do the pre-flight. It's almost time for the fun. You're going to go fly the airplane. You passed the oral portion of your check ride. Congratulations. During this portion, make sure you pull out your checklist, go over each item on the checklist, and make sure you verbalize everything that you're looking for to make sure the DPE knows you didn't skip a step and you understand what a thorough pre-flight looks like. During this time, they're likely to also point out the different antennas, GPS, etc. on the exterior of the airplane to make sure you understand which is which. If you haven't already gone over this with the airplane's owner, I highly suggest you do so leading up to your check ride. What I did and highly suggest you do is go out to the aircraft with the airplane's owner and videotape the conversation, them pointing to each antenna or puck down below and explaining to you what it is. That way you can go back, rewatch the video, and make sure you memorize each piece and part. If you notice anything kind of out of the ordinary, make sure you point it out to the aircraft owner and your mechanic. That way they can take a look and they can say, hey, this is okay. I'm aware. Don't worry about it. That way, if the DPE sees the same thing you do, say, yes, I noticed that a few days ago. I brought it up to the mechanic. The mechanic said, he's aware of it. It's okay. The plane is safe to fly. But do not make things up and say you spoke to somebody when you didn't. Remember, this is an airplane. It's dangerous. Don't take shortcuts when it comes to safety. Now for the fun part, the flight. This is what you've been training for. Landings, maneuvers, and more. Keep calm and enjoy the flight. You got this. Yes, your DPE is likely to ask you questions, have you do a few different maneuvers, and throughout the process, keep talking to you. Remember, during this time, you are the PIC. If you don't hear something, make sure you ask, say again. Don't ignore radio calls, and don't be so nervous that you forget how to fly the airplane. Have fun. Once you finish and you've passed, you've earned the right to celebrate. You've joined the 1%. You're now a private pilot. Congratulations. If you'd like more tips on the ACS or organizing your checkride binder, be sure to check out upcoming videos. Don't forget to share this video with a friend who's also studying for their checkride, and may there always be wind beneath your wings. Peace.